So it's recording here, and is it recording there? Record there, and then I'm just going to snap a couple times. That's good enough for you?
That was 3.
It works for me. Hey, Nick. I just wanted to document. You can just kind of hold. Just document some family history and get some input from your brothers Carl and your brothers Burnham who are here, and just get a sense of your life story a bit. So nothing super formal, just a casual conversation. Of course, it has a camera on, so it's totally casual.
I'd like to think that Millie is here too.
Yeah, Millie's here, and we actually have a nice photo of you two together.
Oh, really?
But maybe let's start at the beginning. What's your name?
I am Nicholas Appleton Arndt, A-R-N-D-T.
And what's the story behind the name of Appleton?
Appleton was a family name, came out of Great Britain, and our maternal grandparents. And I'm afraid you quickly run into a brick wall with me on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know how that name was generated, where it came from, and what importance it might have had.
Yeah.
I always thought it was kind of a fun name. It's a different name that got laughed at, but since I chose not to be a fighter, I let it run its course.
Yeah. Speaking of that, did you ever have a nickname growing up?
Other than Nick.
Other than Nick. You were never a Nicky or anything like that?
I was always Nicky to Mother.
Were you? Okay.
I don't recall that Dad had any special names for us. Millie was always Mill or Millie to him. Dickens' middle name is derived from his middle name. Which was kind of a scary time in our young lives. I guess I was probably around 7 or 8 when Dickens was born. Is that about right? And Dickens was born slightly prematurely with a little bit of a problem in his lower abdomen, which involved a lower gut hernia that was considered to be very, very dangerous back in those times.
Yeah.
Because of the possibility of strangulating a internal gut piece, which could easily have killed a baby.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
When were you born? What's your birthday?
I was born December 9, 1937. Birthday shared with our father, and my young sister Millie was born March 12, 1940, which was a birthday shared with her maternal grandfather. And don't know where else to take that.
That's fine. Do you remember where you were born? Or do you know where you were born?
I was told that I was born in Mercy Hospital, which is over on 9th Avenue in Denver.
Yeah.
Argued with our father for time on end because he said I was born in St. Joseph's. And he was probably more aware of being there than I. So I'm not quite sure where I was born, but it was around here somewhere.
In Denver somewhere. Where did you grow up? And what was your first home?
The first home, which has marginal memories, would have been 860 Vine Street in Denver. Mother and father were married in 33. 33 is right. And they were married in a Christmas wedding and left immediately for New York City and medical school, and I was part of that life but don't recall it.
Do you know where in New York City your parents and you lived?
Don't know.
Okay.
Don't know. I think I would have to leave that up to you.
And then at what point did everybody move back to Denver? I assume your sister Sarah was born in Denver, or was she born in...
I believe she was born here.
Okay.
And just to round that out, father was born here in Denver in 1908. Mother was born in Phoenix, Arizona, an adjunct to the Flower Pot Cattle Company, and which was grandfather's cattle ranch in south central Arizona.
Yeah.
Tough times.
Actually, since you mentioned that, let's go to the story. There's a rifle next to you, and I believe that has a connection to the Flower Pot Cattle Ranch. Can you speak to what it is and its history and a little bit about it?
This is a rifle that grandfather,
This is Grandfather Millette, correct?
grandfather Millette,
What
thank
was
you.
his name?
Daniel Appleton.
Okay.
Up comes Appleton again. This is the rifle that grandfather was called out to the front yard of the ranch house one Arizona night and pointed to the top of a spruce tree in the yard of the ranch house at a defined mountain lion lurking in the top of the tree. Some of us think it was probably a bobcat, but this was a ranch rifle that was used for keeping the stock together and keeping the predators at bay. And at about the same time, an ugly fellow whose name was Pancho Villa was raiding across the Mexican border from Mexico into southern Arizona and stealing horses and things of that nature. The 30-30 was actually identical to this, except for the caliber, was the rifle that was issued to our grandfather, Dan Appleton, as a militia rifle when he was part of the militia that held the western ranch country safe.
Yeah.
Issued by the United States Army.
Yeah, it was an Army issue rifle.
Okay. There's one detail that I've seen on that rifle that I'd love for you to speak about. There's a ring on the stock of it, which I believe would attach to a saddle or to a, is that correct?
It's called a saddle ring.
Okay.
They were used in various ways. You could tie a strap around your shoulders and through here and loop it over the horn of your saddle horn on the saddle. I think these a lot were carried on a very short loop, about that big, through this guy and over the same saddle horn, and just let flop on the side of the horse.
Yeah, that rifle shows some interesting wear patterns on the inside of the stock, where it looks like it was rubbed against a saddle or a horse, and various ranch wear.
Or some grandchildren's play toys and teeth and things.
I'd love to come back to more present time. So you grew up in Denver, and where did you go to school?
School was a bit of a seesaw experience for me, and I think my first school experience that comes to mind, hello, that was at Grayland Country Day School, a private, I think at that point, 6-year school. And Millie and I both went to Grayland Country Day School. In 1946, I was in the 6th grade and Millie was probably in the 4th grade. During that summer of 46, Colorado had a pretty severe nobody's getting hurt yet. The polio epidemic was thought to have originated in the cities. And so Father dutifully and clerically packed us up and sent us to Estes Park, which is a mountain dude ranch town northwest of Denver, about 70 miles. And as soon as we got to Estes Park, we got the polio. Everything went backwards on him at that point. And my memory is that simply because Father was a physician, that he was able to have a single room for his 2 children. So Millie and I had a room together, outside of which was a very ominous presence of what was then called, may still be called, an iron lung. And it's a respiration help for people that had the polio affliction in their thoracic chest stuff. After we were not badly hurt. Mother had a bit of an affliction in an eyebrow.
Really?
Millie's was in her lungs. Mine was in my lower back and legs. And I don't think that our sickness lasted more than probably 6 or 8 months in total length, and in reality, more like 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
Was not a severe thing, although it scared everybody.
The scary thing was that mother was pregnant with me at that point, and they didn't know what that meant. Is that your?
As I recall, nobody knew what that boded for you.
So, in conjunction with the inguinal hernia and the unknown aspect of polio, that was another scary event for the family.
Yeah. After that,
But and you recovered fine with no lasting issues? The jury's still out on that one?
sure, as far as I know,
Yeah, okay.
it's one of those questions on a doctor's exam that always gets asked and answered and studied seriously and never led to anything. So I suspect I was a total remission, cure, and done.
And so you said that was after your 6th grade year? Or you said around 46 or so?
I believe that was the chronology.
Okay. And so then you would have gone off to middle school, and where were you going?
After 6th grade, at Grayland Country Day School, I was shipped off to Byers Junior High School, which was kind of in a rundown part of Denver, and it was kind of a little bit of a tough time.
Tough time in terms of?
Didn't do well in school, didn't apply myself, didn't live up to expectations. Millie continued at Grayland, I believe, and then on to Kent Country Day School, which still exists in some notoriety now.
Yeah.
I was sent to St. John's School in Southborough, Massachusetts, as a
You recall how close to that time that might have been?
probably this was just prior to the polio.
Yeah.
Way to go, Dad. He always used to jump on us for not dating our pictures.
Yeah. Well, this is this is a little bit higher, Dickie. Perfect. Good. Yeah, that's a nice copy that Sarah Francis made for us. So that's not the one. Maybe the original is dated, but we'll have to double check.
I know where that was.
Where was that?
It was on the pavilion at Cheeseman Park.
Really?
You know, the big white castle-like thing.
But you were saying you went off to a school in Massachusetts?
St. John's was a very good, very strong school, very demanding. Didn't fit Nick at all. And when it was apparent that I wasn't going to make anything of that experience, Father bundled me into a family station wagon and headed to western Colorado to a little town called Carbondale, which was the origin of a school name of the Colorado Rocky Mountain School, which probably in many respects was the salvation for me, because it let me follow my outdoor interests, hunting and fishing and building our own dormitories and tents and things like that.
Was it a more traditional type of academic experience, or you mentioned outdoors, but then was it also a military school?
It was not a military school. It was
Okay.
strictly after the experience of the Putney School in Putney, Vermont. At that time, I was in the second and third class of the school, and finished up 4 years there. After that, proceeded to prove my academic inexcellence and went to Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine for a couple of years. Got sick and tired of chasing myself around the country that way. Took off for a year and a half and went to a little town called Jeffrey City, Wyoming, where I mined uranium for a couple of years.
Really? What
And
did that entail? What did that entail?
walking around in some of the most desolate, dry, worn-out country you've ever seen. Digging big holes in soft rocks, digging out radioactive ore, and don't know why I never had a problem from that, because I was exposed to no end of bad stuff there.
Did you walk around with a Geiger counter and?
Yeah. And yeah, I was a sampler who tells everybody what kind of ore they have and where they should put it so they know how to mix it and send it to New Mexico to make big white lights.
Yeah.
That would have been in 58.
And then what prompted you to stop doing that, and then where did you go after that?
One time working at the mine, which was, Jeffrey City was a town, had a population of probably 30. One time I was working out there and there was somebody had built a little cowboy bar out in the far reaches, and I was driving the company pickup out to the bar to get some lunch one day, and going down a long, straight, undulating dirt road, and all of a sudden the lights kind of went out and the shade overcame us, and landing over the top of us was a Cessna 182 who landed in front of our truck, drove up to the bar and went in to have a few pops. And at that point, I thought, maybe this guy figured it out. And that's when I decided that aviation looked like fun, so I jumped into that for about the next 25 years.
Where were you, well, tell me more about that, and where were you based for the aviation part of your career?
I was based here in Denver, private aviation, not an assignment, just a job. And worked for an interesting critter named Harry Combs. And worked with them for quite a while, during which time I got my license and started to fly bigger and better airplanes and into some really good stuff.
Harry Combs was instrumental in developing the Learjet. That,
He would like you to think that. Not so. He was head of Combs Gates Aviation at Stapleton Airfield in Denver. Was enough of a salesman that he talked Charles Gates of the Gates Rubber Company into buying Learjet, which was on its last legs. So Gates bought Learjet, which at that point was headquartered in Wichita, Kansas. And at some point in that line, I got transferred down to Wichita to be with Gates and fly with loud, noisy airplanes.
Were you flying for fun, or were you flying people
No,
around,
no.
or for
It's a business.
just business?
Transportation. You get people from A to B
Okay.
fast and when they wanted to be there. And so
And what were you flying?
I was flying to a very limited degree, the Lear 23 and Lear 24, which were the first two planes that Gates produced and put on the runways. It's not going to go anywhere. And at that point, I'd probably had enough of Mr. Combs and his boisterous ways and decided that I was right the first time and got lucky and found myself a job in the fishing tackle business.
Is that what brought you back to Denver, or is that
Came back to Denver.
okay? Is that where Anglers All came into? the
Yeah,
scene?
it was, Anglers All was started by an interesting couple, and Jim and Jane Poor, out on South Santa Fe in the suburbs of Denver. And I worked for them for 25 years.
Wow. In what capacity were you working for them? In what capacity were you working for them? Did you have any specialty?
Everybody did everything kind of shop.
Okay.
Building fishing tackle, taking people fishing, flying them around to Wyoming to go fishing.
Did you enjoy, what part did you enjoy the most? Did you enjoy the shop work or the guiding work or something else?
It's a good question, Matthew. The parts of our lives that turn out to be the most interesting, I think, always come back to people. And I thought I was enjoying that aspect of the tackle business most. But anyhow, I just kind of ran out the days there at Anglers All and quit back around the turn of the century. Which century, I'm not exactly sure.
do you have any recollections? Did you have any experiences with grandfather in fishing? He fished to some degree. What influence was that?
That was probably a major influence because as I was growing up at age 60, as a budding teenager and living at age 60 for a while at that point, I was lucky enough to go fishing with our grandfather and his two sons, Dan and Bill.
This is grandfather Arndt?
No, it's grandfather Millette.
Grandfather Millette, okay.
Thank you for catching me up. The fishing became something intriguing at that point, and I basically just let it dictate my life at that point. So,
When was your daughter born, and what is her name?
Rebecca B. for Bogart Arndt was born in Denver in '63, and I don't know how you're going to use this, Matthew, but everybody recognizes that it was kind of a quick wedding, and Becca was the short-term off-putting of that. So, Sandy Hilt was Becca's mother. The children of Cardine and Thomas Hilt, a local businessman and housekeeper here. And I expect about that point, I just let the irresponsibility take over.
I've always wondered, where does the name Bogart come from, Rebecca's middle name?
Becca's probably great-grandfather, an industrialist in New York, attributable to what successes I don't know. Fun stories coming out of that time when Bill, who was Mother's youngest brother, followed me to St. Mark's School, but did a much better job at it. And Bill was kind of my non-father father. Bill was younger than Dad, so he was in the Army, but only as a conscript, not as a. Well, he was uniformed, he was sworn in, and all of that. But I'm getting fumbly on you. Where have I gone astray?
Well, since you've mentioned sort of the war years, and something I wanted to ask you about was, what was that like? Because you were born before World War II, and I believe the family convened at, is it 860 Vine Street?
860, right? That was the big family house.
And who all lived there at that time? Who all lived there?
The family consolidated at 860, and the consolidation was Ruth Goodyear, Helen Arndt, Dan Millette, and Bill Millette. And those adults came and went. Basically, the house was run by Mother and Ruth. And they did all kinds of rationing and protecting the home fronts and The war was something that even at age, I guess 5, was pretty scary. Lots of anti-Nazi rhetoric. I don't remember anything having to do with the Japanese aspect of the war, but it was certainly there. But since our fathers were in the Pacific, excuse me, yeah, that's right. No, Bill. I think Bill went right straight into some advanced medical work and became one of the best renowned pathologists in the whole area around here. Very still recognized and respected. So
You had mentioned anti-Nazi rhetoric during that time. With our German heritage, was that ever problematic, or was there any sort of conflict of that sort?
I think not. I think we were taught that ultimately people are what they make of themselves and need to be respected for that, and that was followed along, adhered to. The only thing that I really bring from that is remembering sitting around the old scratchy hardwood radio in grandfather's study at 860 Vine, listening to the wartime stories that came out of it.
Yeah. You told me a couple stories, I believe, about your father, Karl Arndt's experience during the war, and I think at one point he captured 10 Japanese prisoners or soldiers who surrendered to him. Is that correct? Is there some story to that?
Don't know the number. It was around 10 or 12 or a small platoon. It didn't make any difference. They saw him drop their guns. Here we are. Take us where we can get some food.
Well, the backstory, if I can add that,
Please.
was he was on a research mission with the encephalitis mosquito, and they wanted to know more about that because it was causing so many problems in the South Pacific. And so he was charged with going out and collecting these mosquitoes. And one of the places that he found was this cave. And he went into the cave, and that's where they discovered these Japanese that were just on their last legs, hadn't eaten and done anything for weeks. And they saw him, and they just went,
No.
take us. And so it was more of a humanitarian invention.
It was a very violent
Convention.
siege.
That he took them, and knowing father, he probably fed them and gave them medical care.
Yeah.
It wasn't some POW thing.
No.
He was in charge of a general hospital in the South Pacific, and so it was more of a humanitarian intervention than anything.
Yeah, I've heard that he had his service pistol, and he maybe walked in this small group of Japanese soldiers and just sort of with his service pistol as the crowd control, as it were. You know, and these soldiers obviously doing everything they could.
The service pistol was an M1 carbine,
Okay.
and
He's one of the few doctors ever that carried a gun.
yeah, the M1 carbine was issued to doctors because they couldn't teach them to shoot handguns.
Why is that?
They didn't want to.
Oh, okay. And your uncle, this is Rudolf Arndt, he also saw, I believe, some very serious combat as a Marine. Is that correct?
Yes, he was in the South Pacific siege all the way up from New Caledonia clear up to Okinawa, and that was not much fun stuff. That was very tough war.
And when he came back, he was quite shell-shocked. Is that correct?
Probably PTSD is what it's called now, but yeah, he was a kind of a shattered man.
He never really recovered from the war in any meaningful
No,
way.
He was a bit of an alcoholic, I believe, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly.
Okay.
I'm not sure how one defines an alcoholic now, but succumbing to the wiles of alcohol for sure, but hit him pretty hard.
But so when the war ended, did the family all leave 860 Vine Street? What was the next transition?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody came home,
Mm-hmm.
dispersed.
Yeah.
Lawrence Goodyear and his wife, Ruthie, and one or two kids headed back to Buffalo, New York, which is where his family was. Lawrence was a very good attorney, and I pretty much draw a blank after that one in that part of the family.
Yeah. And just so I'm clear, Lawrence was married to Ruth, who was Helen's sister, is that?
Sister,
Okay. Let me make sure I understood that.
mother number one, Ruthie two, Dan, and then Bill, right?
Both Helen and Ruthie being very young when they were courted, and Dan Millette was not pleased with these people that were coming over to talk about marriage to the daughters. Both of them were father and Barney Goodyear were able to talk grandfather into it, and it worked out pretty well. But old Daniel these girls were very young.
How young are we roughly?
In the 20s.
Oh, less than that. Our mother was married when she was barely 18.
I wasn't aware of that.
It's early. I mean, we can run the numbers.
Yeah.
Grandfather was not pleased, and father by that point had gotten his degree as a doctor, so he had a little street cred in Denver with his father, and they were able to get themselves in the door, and it worked out.
I was not aware of the conflict there. Doesn't surprise me, but
Daniel Millette was so serious about everything that you better have your ducks in a row if you're going to be doing anything, and especially if you're talking about joining this family. And
he was a formidable man, but a man that had a good amount of love and attention for his family too. He was not an abusive or ignoring person. He had his own ways, and
totally protective.
they were his ways. Yeah.
Considered briefly as a run for the presidency of the United States through the Senate, and with the idea that he would be pushed all the way.
Probably would have been a pretty good one. Probably would have been a Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
So.
He looked a lot like him.
Yeah. Behaved like him somewhat.
So with Dan Millette, So I know he had the Flower Pot Ranch. Was he born in Arizona, or was he, where's his,
No, he was born and raised in New York.
in New York, okay.
Columbia College educated, and then came down with tuberculosis and was told the only way that he could have a life of any meaning would be to move to a high, dry climate.
Mm.
Hence Gila, Arizona.
He never had any background in ranching at all.
Yeah.
Went there and developed one of the most successful cattle operations at the time in that area,
Yeah.
and then went on to Kansas City for the development of the cattle industry, which at the point after World War II, there was no protein for anybody to eat. And the farmers had bank support to grow farm things, but there was no ranch, no meat.
Mm.
And grandfather recognized that and went to the government and said, we need to have financing for ranchers because the country has no protein.
Yeah.
Came to Denver, subsequently the First National Bank, and created the Cattlemen's Trust, which was the arm of the banking world that got money to ranchers so they could grow food
Yeah.
for the United States. And
Is-
that's how he transitioned from cattleman to banker in Denver.
And is that where the money was generated in the Millette side, or was there money prior to that?
Probably a
Ranching
big
was
part
very
of it.
successful. He had one of the most successful ranching operations. I suspect it started in Kansas City and brokering,
Probably, yeah.
selling beef, and then banking in Denver.
And do you know where the Millettes were before they were in New York? Do you know anything about Daniel's parents and forefathers?
I don't, Matthew. I remember hearing family names bandied about, and this is Uncle who and what have you, and those things didn't stick with me. Burnham, you're not saying anything.
Bernie?
I'm too far away from the microphone.
Growing up, I've heard a bit about Daniel Millette, but I really know almost nothing about your paternal grandfather. Is that Dr. Rudolf Arndt?
Right.
And he was born in Germany, is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
We're pretty sure that his wife, Elizabeth, was born in Germany. Rudolph may have been born in Rock Springs, Wyoming, or may have been born in Germany.
But you think he grew up in Rock Springs, Wyoming, is that?
His mother was the lead nurse of the only hospital in the world at that point. It was built to try to keep the copper miners in Rock Springs
In good shape. And did your grandfather, did he speak German at all? Or is the German culture fairly,
I don't recall the German language coming in.
okay.
If it would have come in, it would have come in through Elizabeth. She was kind of the matriarch. And very good, strong Germanic woman.
The interesting aspect of that relationship is father and his father, Rudolph, practiced medicine together
Right.
for a number of years.
Yeah. And that was practicing in Denver.
Denver, in the very earliest days of medicine in Denver.
208 Republic Building.
That's it.
That was where their office was located? And actually, Dickon, since you're here, do you remember your paternal grandfather? Was he around? Okay. And do you know when he passed on?
Don't know the year.
Okay. Were you a young boy, I assume?
I remember Grandfather Millet's death and funeral, but I don't really remember Grandfather Arndt.
For some reason, it was kind of not talked about that much, and I don't know why.
It was before Grandfather Millet, I think, wasn't it? Or did
Yeah, I think so.
fairly close.
Was that an uncommon thing for your father to be practicing with his father?
I don't think so. Back then, I don't think so. It was almost automatic. Here's the business that you need to pick up on.
And were they general practitioners?
Yes. Such as that was back then.
There really weren't a lot of specialties.
Okay.
Although Father was board certified internist down the road.
Okay.
But back then they were renowned around the area as kind of like Dr. House. People would come to them with difficult diagnoses, and they would put their heads together and just kind of discover, diagnose difficult cases.
Yeah.
And they were known for that. But this was before, I mean, they barely had gotten x-rays at that point, and none of the other imaging was available, so it was intuitive medical sense of the human being.
Yeah. I have heard some stories about your father marching in the civil rights movement. Can you tell me what you know about that?
Probably this is the origin of some of the conflict that Dickon has referred to. Our father was a very liberal, very free-thinking man, and had great sympathies for people having hard times, and tied up with a longtime friend of Dickens and Burnham's and mine, whose name was Medill Barnes, and he was kind of a college-age, rabble-rousing sort of liberal.
But turned into a hardcore lobbyist.
Yeah,
I mean, he took it seriously.
yeah, he was very.
And
Very.
this Medill Barnes, he was a classmate of yours, or is he
He was a classmate of mine at CRMS,
okay.
Rocky Mountain School, but somehow our father and he split off from me and others of the family, and so politically, yeah, there's nothing Hatfield and McCoy like about it. It was just what we did. He probably one of the best known of the civil rights activities was the March on Selma, Alabama. Kind of shepherded by a classy black lady named Rosa Parks, who father was very proud of having known her and met with her and conversed with her. So,
Well, Medill and Father were instrumental in organizing a group through the Episcopal Church in Denver and got a group of people together, and I don't know if it was through Father and or Medill, chartered an airplane and went there with this group from Denver. And that was all organized.
It's even better than that. Medill bought an airplane.
And took the clergy and
It took a lot of people, and yeah, and
And what was the church that they were a part of?
Episcopal Church.
St. John's.
St. John's, okay.
St. John's in the wilderness, the see of the Episcopal Church in Colorado. Medill being a great liberal that came from a wealthy family and could afford to go out on these missions and start newspapers and buy airplanes. And
Medill's family name was Medill McCormick Barnes. McCormick as in McCormick Deering, the tractors, and a substantial industrial family.
he got into aviation at the same time you did, really, didn't he?
Yeah, he kind of followed me, and when he saw that I was having fun.
I had one other small question that's not related to what we've just been talking about. I know that our mother name was Sarah, but always had the nickname of Millie. I think I've heard that Helen, her mother, was also called Millie as a child. Is that true to you?
Yes, and I don't know why.
I've always wondered if the last name of Millette became just sort of contracted to Millie, but that's...
Yeah, Sarah Millette Arndt. Your mother was Millie because of her middle name, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But Dickens still got the best name.
I don't think I have any other real questions. Is there anything that you'd like to...
Anything you want to close with?
Hmm?
Anything you want to close with?
No,
You're done.
things will keep coming up for the next year, so maybe. So, how about you guys? What questions do you have?
Kind of maybe more of an existential question. What made you the happiest in your life? Yeah, what made you the most happy? Either in the long term or very briefly.
Presume that's directed at me as an individual rather than as part of a family, but
Yeah. Or however you want to take it.
because of my absolute dunderheaded ways about dealing with education and school and all that sort of thing, I sort of reveled in success, and so jumped into things like scuba diving. That was really fun for me to do that. Perhaps the best was reaching over and patting an empty seat on my first solo flight.
Yeah.
That was hairy. That was good.
Well, flying was something that you did on your own. Nobody else influenced you, and you were able to fly single seat by yourself.
And fly some real airplanes too. So, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to add my last little bit that Nick has been the best brother, anybody could ever have. You taught me so much. You took time for me and Bernie. Not that Father didn't, but you related to us and showed us so many really fun things.
There were a lot of things we did share that was worthwhile, I think.
But it was all because of you.
Well, to complete your question, Matthew, the rest of the questions, the saddest part of my life was losing your mother. So
I've sensed from your brother, both your brothers, how much you mean to them. Did you have a sense of being the eldest in the family, of being, did you have a sense of being the eldest child in the family, of looking out for your siblings and to paving a way for them, or protecting them in certain ways, or teaching them in others?
I don't think so. I think we were all together, and this is what we did together, and
Nick just did fun things. And then we looked at them and thought they were fun, and he showed us how to do them.
like taking Bernie and Dickin up to Union Reservoir north of Denver with our bows and arrows hunting carp. Do you remember
Fishing
that
game
at all?
people, they had these reservoirs got overrun with these giant fish that were eating all the other fish, and Nick learned really quickly how you deal with bows and arrows with fish, and so he outfitted us, and we went there, and it was just wild because you wade into this water with these giant fish, and you shoot them, and they would just take off and run all over, and you'd bring them in, and it was endless. There was no limit, and they wanted to get rid of them, and we didn't think anything about it except for how fast you could get back in there and do it again, and it was just a wild time.
Really?
You know, for hunting, it was.
Was it easy hunting, it sounds like?
Oh, quite. I mean, they were right there.
And he outfitted us, we were little kids, and he outfitted us with Polaroid sunglasses. Like little kids didn't wear, but this was the thing that allowed you to see the fish. And so he had these Polaroid sunglasses, and all of a sudden we could see the fish, and it just was after that we were old. He showed us a lot of fun times.
Thank you, I hope so. Hope I didn't hurt you too bad. Actually, you and Bernie seem to pick on each other more than having me pick. Didn't you orchestrate a bit of blood draining from our brother with an ice axe?
Oh, kind of accidental, yes. After watching the first ascent of Mount Everest, we decided we'd go out and assault Mount Everest in our icy north driveway, and Father had an ice axe, and Burnham, stand behind me, and I swung the ice axe and hit Burnham just below the eye, and of course completely came unglued, ran inside. Burnham came in, and Father was there, and Father calmly took out his handkerchief, dabbed his eye, said everything's okay, went down and got it sewed up without blinking an eye. And
Your father actually sewed him up?
No,
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 no.
took him down to somebody that really knew how to sew. But under fire, the old man was rock solid.
He's sewed me up.
Did he really?
Yeah.
For what? What injury?
Fairly ugly scar.
Well, I was chasing through a neighbor's house and he was about to catch me, so I dove and flew through a plate glass window. Can't quite see it anymore. I'm not sure that I have.
It was very evident for a long time.
See a little bit there, I think. Yeah.
I think that's it right there.
So father actually sewed that up.
Was time of the essence on that one?
I'm sorry?
Was time of the essence on that one?
No,
And also it wasn't your face?
wasn't my face, wasn't my blood. It was just something that had to be dealt with before dinner.
We still have recording time, yeah. Would you address a memory, confirm, that I have of, I'm guessing it was 1956, 57. We took a family trip to Aspen in the spring to go skiing, and we went to the Toklat Lodge
Right.
for dinner, and driving down. Do you remember that? Do you remember?
I remember driving up.
Well, the memory that I have was we finished dinner, and I don't remember the dinner, but I remember driving.
You look at the camera and you go, can we take a break?
Yeah.
You're talking about the deer?
Yes.
The deer head?
I was in the back seat on Mother's lap, and you and Dad, I think you were driving, because you couldn't have been much past 16.
Yeah, that would have been
Just
about.
got your driver's license, and all I can remember was
The Toklat Lodge was a.
I'm not quite sure this is so emotional for me, but
It's
probably because I think about it about once a year. Driving down and stopping, I was aware that you stopped, and I probably was sleeping in Mother's lap, and I woke up and couldn't see the headlights and the snowbanks, and there was a freshly killed deer carcass, and you thought, if we turn off the lights, the mountain lion will come back. Is that accurate to your memory?
I don't remember that part of it, but I remember coming across the deer, and it was a full-grown doe mule deer, and it was just the half of the brisket and the head and neck. The cat had taken the rest of it off, and everybody knew what it was. It's a wonderful little windy mountain road of about 8 or 10 miles, and there were deer all over the place, and there were probably plenty of mountain lions too. And so we found him and went and looked at him and decided that the deer needed to have his dinner, so left him alone.
You did spot the mountain lion?
No,
Never.
but we saw the tracks. Yeah, it was pretty clear.
How old were you then, do you think?
I think Dickin's right. I think I was probably just barely driving at 16. And I think Dad was letting me learn a little bit about driving in the mountains.
Millie was on that trip to Aspen too.
Well, I only remember me and Mother and you and Dad in the car in the 1950 Ford sedan Where was everyone else? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that at all. We stayed at the Bell Mountain Lodge. And
That's
all of
good,
us-
yeah.
A lot of us were there. And this one, Aspen, was just, you know, it was crawling along at that point.
I was before Aspen was Aspen.
But Nick had already learned how to ski. And that was another thing. We owe our skiing to Nick.
Eskimo Ski Club.
Let's take a break. Time to break.
Get what you wanted?
Yeah, yeah. Didn't have any specific goals. Just wanted to get some family history.
What did you learn?
I learned a lot.
I'll get that in a second. Again.
I knew some of the stories, but not most of them. I think I had always thought that great-grandfather Rudolph was born in Germany. I didn't realize that. Like, I thought I didn't realize that there was a whole life.
A total generation in there, yeah.
Well,
I thought Grandmother Art was born in Nebraska.
France?
Nebraska.
Elizabeth Arndt.
Elizabeth, yes. And she was from the Waugh family.
Yeah, Sam Waugh, but I thought that was Lincoln. And she had moved to Denver and met grandfather there.
I think they met in,
She was a nurse.
But, right.
I think they were both at PSL. They met as doctor and nurse at PSL, but
Amazing. Imagine that.
A doctor and a nurse.
Doctor hooks up with nurse.
yeah.
Life goes on. Life never stops.
Was Alice with you all at 280 Vine or
860.
860 Vine?
no. I don't think she and Bill had married at that point. We remember laughing at funny stories about the two of them on a honeymoon trip in Vermont, going out in canoes and tipping over and losing cameras and things like that.
And Alice was also an aviatrix. Very one of the, I mean, that was early for women to be flying around.
Yeah, that was pretty off the cuff. Well, I don't know what we've just done, but
Just a little family history for posterity's sake. Should we wrap it there? Thank you, Nick.
you bet.
We'll have some more conversations.
Well, this will probably stir up some memories that we've had buried for a while, so. I don't think I'm very good at that sort of thing, Matthew, but it's kind of fun to try and see if you might be good at it, but
Well, thank you, Matthew, for doing this.
Yeah, getting it all down. Thanks, Nick. Turn it off.
done.
We're done. We'll call it. We'll call it there.